For the moment, many of us are stuck with the sounds around us. Being at home, without the usual commute or many plans for travel, we can get stuck in our own limited playlist of music and atmosphere. On some level, more than just a change of scenery, we're craving new sounds. But if we do go out and travel, accepting the new risks associated with heading out into the world and staying in a hotel, what do we want to hear? Are we looking for soothing sounds, or are we ready to celebrate music's wide range of expression? How are hotels embracing this opportunity to once again assert themselves as cultural intersections that provide comfort, escape, and new perspective on the world around us? Welcome back to the Tide Generator podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten Nelson. Today, we're going to talk about another way that music and sound are reframing this moment, specifically within hotels. In hotels, we find a unique combination of hospitality, comfort, brand, and culture. And it's an interesting space to talk about how, with so many expectations changing around us on a day-to-day basis, how is the music selection changing in hotels to reflect and engage audiences in new ways? So here with me to talk about that, we have Pablo Henderson. He is Vice President of Marketing with Equinox Hotels. Hello, Pablo.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we have Anida Gurlit. She is Creative Director of Music Design with Mood Media. Hello.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hey. Cool. Well, I'm glad we're here to have this conversation because I know I really love talking about music and sound with both of you. So I'm glad we're going to do an update. I think actually to get started, let's actually talk about just the way things are right now. What changes are you seeing now with like the tone and the goals of clients within the hospitality space?
For me, I feel like everybody is kind of wanting to, more than ever, try to establish more of an intimate connection with people through music, and that is reflected also in the business realm. I feel like people are trying to get a more authentic and human kind of experience rather than something too commercial.
And that falls in line with something you've been observing too, right, Pablo, with the increased interest and mindfulness and meditation and calm and connection?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that the purpose of travel has changed quite a bit, given the landscape that we're seeing right now. People are staying a little closer to home, but they are still staycationing and finding the need to be in new spaces. This travel is still happening, but there's a level of mindfulness and repose that's kind of needed right now. I think the regenerative aspect of travel has become more prominent. I specifically, I work with a brand that's whole focus is around wellness and well-being. So I'm acutely, exposed to that on a daily basis. But I think it's a theme that's going around the world right now.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that wellness is like seeping into all kinds of different verticals. And when it comes down to it, it's like, sure, people are still trying to like maintain their businesses and draw people in, but I think what's more important and what I've found really appealing to watch is that people are trying to be more open-minded, more inclusive, and more, putting more importance on creating a warm and friendly environment without being over the top.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time where we're trying to give each other enough space to be, safe. But we also, I think there is more human connection happening, right? People really are interested in the more personal experience of spaces and each other. So that's good. I guess, how do you see that relating to music choice, then I guess it depends on brand and location and so many factors. Do you want to talk a little bit about the different ways we can create connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways, like you said. There's a lot of things to consider. It's like, is the sound in line with the brand and accomplishing the kind of ideal atmosphere that you want for the brand? If your aim is to make people feel calm and comfortable, I think there's some formal qualities of music that we all gravitate towards. It's just like easy to digest tones, and instrumentation, nothing that's too abrasive and off-putting. But then there's also, the lyrical content that you have to consider, which is a whole other level. It's like you don't want, especially during these times, we at Mood Media have had to, really focus on how do we make sure that we don't include lyrics that touch on specifics that may be more off-putting now than ever, having to do with, like illness or catching something, or, things that we didn't think this time last year was a problem. We've had to pull some things, try to be more sensitive about the impression we're giving to audiences.
Yeah, that human curation that comes back in, where an algorithm can't necessarily pick out all those sensitive subjects. So it's kind of good that there's people that still do this. And I know that, Pablo, that's one of your favorite topics too, is the curation, the actual experience of really being selective and trying to create an atmosphere. What do you think the human element is in choosing the music for the hotels?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are definitely in a period of time where there's an extra layer of sensitivity, and that manifests physically in the fact that we have covered the mouth and the nose with a mask. And so we don't have those cues with the people that we're interacting with. So we are reading the eyes and listening better, one could argue, right? We're more attuned to using those other senses in the absence of other cues. I do think that it's interesting to think about what is an appropriate way to mourn a period of great loss, and what is an appropriate way to feel during this period of time. And I've always tried to make sure that I was not the one dictating that in any way, but that I was providing an array of choice, and that people would, resonate with whatever those options were on a very personal level. It's like telling someone what they should listen to when they go to a funeral, or what they should worship to. We're in a period of time where, yes, there are specific words and lyrics that are probably not appropriate for this time. But as far as genre goes, who's to say that now is not the time of punk rock revival, right? Revolutionary, rebellious, anti-institution. Now, granted, that doesn't really fit with the profile of your average hotel, but I'm using it just to kind of make an example, an extreme example of the ways that human curation can really be thought-provoking. And if we go back to the genesis of the role of the innkeeper sat at a crossroads, and their primary purpose was to serve as a communication highway, connecting cultures in society and bringing people to an understanding of what the most innovative, most future forward, the latest fashions, tastes, sounds were. And I'm talking about thousands of years ago, long before there was no room at the inn.
When like on one side of it, like when I came back to work and thought about like, well, how do we approach music design now? I thought, oh, everybody wants to be soothed, everybody wants a calmer experience and something that's like more warm and fuzzy and inviting. But on the other side of it, there are clients that are like, let's forget our worries. Let's celebrate the positive, like let's highlight energy and positivity, because that's what we need, and it's like, I can't disagree with that, because I think both experiences are valid right now.
I think one of the things that's interesting for me is, in the craft of music curation, especially in the hospitality space, the approach has often been rather two-dimensional or like binary, because it thinks of zones, right? And you're either here or you're not in that space. And I think of sound in a more like three-dimensional way, in that you have so many other variables: time of day, context, the behavioral pattern for that space. And so what we are seeing specifically, and due to COVID, is this idea of an adaptation of how spaces are used that's atypical, and the heat mapping of the guest journey has changed because the bar isn't open, for instance. So that's a different journey that they're taking physically throughout the space, and the time that they're spending in the hotel is different. It used to be that people defined music in a hotel, it's rather cliche, but it's the lobby music and the elevator music, right? Obviously, we've gone way past that. But the club, if there's a nightclub in that hotel, or the restaurant may not be open, and the lobby bar might not be open, the spa is likely open, and the hotel room is where you'll probably spend a much larger amount of your time. So heat mapping that experience based off zones is no longer quite as effective as it used to be. And so you really have to look at the intent or the outcome that you're trying to drive from the delivery of that sound. And much of it you no longer have control of, because it's in the privacy of someone's room.
Yeah, that was something I think we had discussed before that made me kind of think about, well, sometimes, for clients, we will do Spotify playlist for them, just to kind of market their signature sound, So I was wondering, like, that is one way, I guess, you can kind of keep connected with your clients, as they can't come in and they can't do, there's only like, I don't know, 25, 50% of the business for certain hotels right now. And it's like, is that something that you guys have done? Like, is it, it's kind of nice, I think, the idea of having, whether it be through Spotify or any other venue, to kind of send somebody a playlist, because it's like the old school mixtape. It's intimate. It's kind of like, hey, you enjoyed our spa so much. Here's the spa experience if you need to de-stress later. Or if you, just want, like, if they love your hotel and you have that signature sound, you can say, like, well, here's some new artists that we're highlighting in our playlist, and this is who we are. It's kind of like a nice little gift when they leave, and they can kind of remember, oh, that time that I got to go to this hotel, that was fabulous. I love that idea, and I didn't know if you guys actively do that. I know that there are plenty of hotels that do that kind of thing and have so much of a defined signature sound.
Yeah, I think I've been very involved in the curation of playlists in the past. Mm-hmm. I think that travel and music are inseparable. And much like smell, you can hear a song and be taken back to a trip, especially if it's outside of your norm, an international trip or an exotic location, and hear a song, and you're immediately thrust back to that memory. And they say that your travel experience is a majority of the planning process ahead of time, a little bit of what you do while you travel, and then the afterglow from the trip and all the memories from the trip. So music's probably a great mechanism for delivering that afterglow.
Yeah, I agree. There's been some trips like, and that's the emotional connection that I think everybody's after. It's not only like, hey, we want you to feel good when you come visit, but here's something that whenever you hear it, you'll remember this time and hopefully you had a wonderful time. So I think that's probably the best part of my job, in my opinion, is trying to establish those points of nostalgia, points of, something that engages people and says, even if they don't know the song, they discover something and then they remember that when they go home.
And music is the ultimate brand extension in this case. You can go beyond the physical location and keep people engaged even when they can't be there, or hopefully keep them engaged to the point where they want to come back. That would be a nice goal. And I think that's people right now. I think everyone's sort of on the cusp of starting to think about maybe traveling again. And kind of as you're saying, the space has changed. People aren't congregating in bars or restaurants or the club and the hotel anymore, but you do still have that opportunity to make an impression, even in those little truncated moments as they check in and kind of swiftly move through the lobby now. I guess that impression, that is kind of what you're both talking about, maybe making that moment really matter and really having it tell a story immediately so that people can receive it. I think we talked a little bit about how the pandemic might actually sometimes it might be too much of a presence in everybody's mind as we're choosing music. And I guess, how can we use music to flip that narrative, to actually take this moment to tell a different story, use that innkeeper role to actually, really change the conversation and maybe bring some feeling of unity at this time?
I think for me, at least, and by the way, the bars being closed and a restaurant not being at full capacity is all very temporary and specific to what state you're in or what city you're in or what country you're in. So what may be happening in one place may be completely irrelevant in another. But one thing that is universal around all of this is that we are reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with the outdoor space, fresh air, the breath. There are some universal qualities to this experience as a shared experience for humankind, regardless of borders and city limits. And so, despite our tribalism, our cultural tribalism, there has been, for me, a reconnection to natural sounds and this idea of hearing the chirp of a bird or, leaves rustling or, the ocean. And I'm starting to pick up on it in very unique ways. I'm starting to hear those sounds in music that is being played around me. And I don't know whether it's an intentional thing or not. Maybe it's now that, it's top of mind for me. I'm hearing it all the time. But I think that it's a pretty effective way of bringing us back to things not only that are important and that bring us together and unify us, but it also is this call back to a greater mission for everyone, regardless of where they are, which is that during this time, there's a healing that has to occur of some kind. And while there's a lot of conversation also about what the state of our planet, and there are fires in some places and other things that are happening in other parts of the world and storms that are hitting, there is this powerful component of nature that I think is coming back in music in a really beautiful way, in a very man-made human way, but can be across the board experienced regardless where you are. And what I love about it the most is that it's not dependent on any language, specifically. It's really universal, really global.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're like gravitating as an individual, you're gravitating towards organic sounds for your just like music choices or tones. And then at the same time, that's, I think, intuitively what we all are doing is getting out in nature so we can kind of just escape, the problems and focus on connecting with ourselves and the earth. And I mean, I think, of course, that's a beautiful thing. And I would say, yeah, like that's definitely how you can kind of create some more intimate experience, or things that are easy to digest. It's acoustical, organic sounds. So yeah, another thing that I feel like I'm noticing is that people are way more open to more eclectic sounds right now. There's definitely, I would say more elevated brands that were always connected to more eclectic playlists and different types of music, along with like more global selections, like, foreign language, pop. And now it seems to be that emphasis seems to be kind of spreading over more mainstream type brands, where they're kind of asking for, can we have like more diversity in our playlists, and that, I mean, that's including, more distinct focus on Black culture type playlists, as well as, multinational type experiences.
I think it's interesting because, we have thought about diversity in such a visual way, and yet diversity should manifest itself in a sonic way also.
Yeah.
And maybe that is what we're seeing people respond to, is a desire for sonic diversity to mirror the other aspects of their lives.
Yeah, I think I love seeing that, and that is actually happening. And it's like, when I first started back to work, I kind of thought, oh, well, that's cool. Like that person, wants more diversity, where it felt like in the past, a lot of more commercial clients will probably be like, well, we don't want to like be off-putting to any one group, so let's keep it fairly neutral. People are taking more chances in trying to connect with a more diverse audience. And that's been a really positive, nice thing to see. I have to admit, it's not something I expected, but it makes sense.
The topic of COVID has taken over so much of our narrative this year, but people are still falling in love, right? People still have dreams. People are still dealing with struggles. People are still breaking up. I'm sorry to say, but they're still breaking up too, so all of these, the arcs of the narrative for everyone's personal life, regardless of how they've been impacted by this year specifically, are still happening. And we can't expect people to extract themselves from those really fundamental experiences that have happened throughout time. And music is always going to tell that story. There are periods of time where music has played more of a role in telling a broader story, but every teenager since the beginning of time has had that, heartbreak song, right? So why should it change in 2020?
What song is it this year, though? You're like listening to it over and over again.
Yeah, I think it is nice to try to take a break from the somber. I feel like everyone feels like they need to stay in this very somber mood, and yeah, like you're saying, life is going on in other ways, and as you're saying, the conversation seems to be changing. It sounds like, yeah, hotels are a little more willing to engage more actively in the conversation and what's happening in the world outside, instead of creating a safe sort of like neutral beige environment. They're kind of saying, okay, this is what's going on out there. How about we bring some of that in here and engage in the conversation? I guess, would you see this as an opportunity? This could be the changing, or maybe, as Pablo was saying, getting back to the roots of hotels as being a voice, as leading the conversation. you see that starting up now? Is that one thing we can take away from this?
The hotel as a 24-hour ecosystem. There are very few other business models other than hospitals and international airports. I'm sure you could probably name a few others, but there aren't too many other operations that are open 365 days a year, 24/7. And so you have this living, sleeping, educating, transacting space that's just never stops. And it's impossible to keep that separate from the outside world, because in itself it is its own little world, but a mirror of everything that's happening outside. I think that for those brands that are able to seize this moment and find new ways to communicate with their guests and to deliver on experience, like physical experience, they'll succeed. I think for those that are not able to reinvent themselves in some way, you will likely find yourself with a little bit of the vanilla, cookie cutter experience. I do think that it's all about balance also. And while we talk about sound a lot in the context of noise, silence is a sound too in its own regard, right? Like, it depends on how you look at it. And I think nothing does more justice to sound than in the context of silence too. And I think that hotels that can really create spaces that cultivate silence also will do well. So it's this mix, creating a balance of some kind that I think you want to achieve. Obviously, we're all in the business of sound, and we're all in the business of creating environments that speak to the senses. But I think that the evolution is more about choice. People want options. So finding ways that you can create as much of that in one space so that you're reflective of your entire ecosystem and all of the reasons that people are there, whether it's because they're doing a staycation for leisure or they're still having to travel, is important.
Yeah, it's probably pretty important to make sure that you're distinctive as a brand or a location, or like, it's important now to create that balance so that your place is memorable, so finding a way to even to curate the music and then curate the quiet too, and curate the pauses between, and so that people remember your hotel and it doesn't just fade away. Maybe that's why people are engaging in a new way with this right now. It's more vital than ever than to have a brand voice and to be noticed and recognized. So that's,
our rooms are soundproofed, as an example. And when you're in your room, what's the last thing you want to hear? The person in the room next to you, right?
Yeah. Especially now, you don't want to feel close to anybody, and you definitely don't want to hear the guy next door snoring. So talk about, like, serenity is all about my own little bubble, but also the music I want to hear, the feelings I want to have. I like that. And it seems like it's really you guys have talked a little bit about the geographical questions. There are countries, locations, geographies that things are reopened. Things are busy. They've stayed busy because they're in wild, open spaces. But I think one of the limitations that we've talked a little bit about is people, even if they are traveling, they're staying a little closer to home. They're not necessarily going on those big journeys right now. And I think, are you finding that hotels now have an opportunity to create more of an escape feeling, more of a far off land, even if you've only gone to the place in the next town over?
Well, I from my point of view, I think that a lot of hotels, from what I've seen, have taken this opportunity with this lull in 2020 for them to kind of reinvent themselves. Like you mentioned, it's like, well, here's the opportunity to do, that, to upgrade our environment like we've been wanting to, but we've gotten busy, and it's something that I have seen. So there's some request, for, we want to kind of go in this different direction. So let's mix up, what we were doing and redesign our experience, not only with music, but with, the environment and the products that they choose and the wallpaper, or the paint or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a new, unusual opportunity to kind of change up the way things are. And I think that, yes, I think people, aren't traveling too far to kind of get that new experience.
I think it's funny because we tend to think of escape as not being where we are and going to another place. And music can certainly do that for us, but the place does not need to be another place geographically. I think that much of the allure of travel and of staying in a hotel is a little bit of fantasy, taking on another persona, kind of not being your regular self. We get so caught up in our day-to-day habits, but when we stay in a hotel, we want those creature comforts, obviously, but we can take on a new identity in some way. We can do things differently. You might not have a really lavish breakfast when you're every day at home. You certainly might not have breakfast in bed when you're at home. But there's an element of being frivolous and having more play in your life and potentially more time on your hands, and not needing to be addressing the same daily concerns that you have, whether it's a morning commute or children that you have to take care of, whatever that long list might be. So there is this element of fantasy that is given room to breathe. And I think that that's a really interesting role for music to play. I think of, yes, hearing global sounds and being transported to other parts of the world, but I also think of bygone eras of travel and being transported to, the 50s and the 60s, and, certain sounds that take you on that journey, or futuristic sounds, and being very modern, and this dystopian world of some kind that you might, be in. Travel and escape manifest themselves in so many different ways, and there's probably no other art form quite like music to be able to do it. That's why Hollywood embraces music so much. I mean, the tools that are used in hotels are the same tools that are used in setting a scene for an incredible film, and you're the actor, and the story is about to unfold.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, like, the more interesting music programs that we design are the ones where we do get to tell a story, and we do get to use just hugely diverse eras of music, in the combination of different music genres for a different day part or a different zone is so much fun. Creatively, it's unfortunately we don't get a lot of opportunities to do that, because I think sometimes in the past, at least, people were trying to kind of appeal to everyone, and like we mentioned before, you end up kind of just having something beige.
I feel like every time I stay in a hotel, the soundtrack is James Bond for me. Like that's what I want, and that's a pretty broad spectrum of sounds over the years, and includes a lot of different artists, from Shirley Bassey to Duran Duran. I mean, there's a full gamut there of different sounds, but it's James Bond is kind of what I'm aiming for. What about you, Kirsten? What's your soundtrack for when you travel?
Yeah, I think you kind of describe it well, because you really do want to feel like the hero in your own amazing narrative. Like when you go to a hotel, when you're on a trip, it's like you're saying you get to be a slightly different version of yourself, maybe just for a minute, or you can create some kind of intrigue or mystique.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think that's if you want to be the hero of your own story, if I was the hero of my own story, yeah, it would definitely be some kind of like, it's got like, it's esoteric, it's surprising. It's not what you'd expect from that person. Like, what's behind that newspaper is actually is something else than you expect. So yeah, maybe it's creating intrigue. That'd be mine.
The one thing is perfect. Yeah. It's like, I kind of want to be like, well, in another life, I'm this well-dressed spy and nobody knows it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you do feel your better self to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. The mere fact that you're walking around your room in slippers and a robe, and you're in a king bed, maybe, there's just so many aspects that lend themselves to being your better self. And for a long time, travel has been a bit of a grind because it's around business and demands and whatnot. But I do see a bit of a renaissance in leisure travel happening, ironically enough, despite the fact that people are not traveling as far for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe that does get back to the beginning point and maybe the wrapping up point of this conversation is about that feeling of hospitality. Hospitality is creating comfort and welcome and changing the conversation a little bit. I guess maybe when we look ahead now, and we all know that we all want to feel like a hero, and we're all in the middle of a beautiful narrative that's unexpected and different from our normal life. I guess how do you see hospitality? What does hospitality sound like as we try to bring all those things together?
I think it sounds, like a lot of things, and it really depends on the part of hospitality. It can be really calming and soothing and earthy, but it can also be really upbeat and, motivating and inspiring, hopefully inspiring, much like travel is, and the fantasy of living your best life or becoming someone else, it can be dramatically different depending on where you go.
Yeah, I think that I think certainly there's something very optimistic because I think people return to travel with just this, I missed you. I want to rekindle this relationship again. I haven't been on a plane in a while, or I haven't, taken this much time off for myself. But I hope that hospitality always stays somewhat provocative. And, you could take the word provocative in whichever way you want. I think that it can manifest itself in lots of different ways. But the idea is to provoke something unexpected and new and thoughtful and potentially daring and sexy and, all of the things that you associate with provocative. I think hospitality has a mandate to deliver on. And I think that that's what you're going to see for the future, especially as the industry is also challenged to embrace new forms of technology. We may actually see some really interesting innovations around sound and use of sound. With all the new devices that we're having to use to enable different types of stays. And it's, again, that element of choice. People want different ways to stay, whether it's high touch or contactless.
I hope you're right. I think that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, that definitely gets to the personal effect of it too, a personalized effect that you can have if you can choose your own music, choose your own soundtrack, choose your own.
I love that. Exactly. We didn't even talk about personalization. That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, we can dig into it. But yeah, I think that's what people are craving, and especially now, that's like we just said, we want to be at the center of our own narrative, right? So let's start selecting. And I think it's an opportunity for hospitality. So yeah. Well, thank you. I think I'm glad we got to talk about this because it actually does. It makes me excited for when we do start to leave and travel again and make journeys and reconnect. And I really do think that it will be about returning to someone that we've really missed. The thing I miss most, I think, is hotels. So yeah, I can't wait to get back. So yeah.
You can come and sit at my hotel anytime you want.
You're a good innkeeper. Thank you. I will. I'll head over there to the west side of town. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And yeah, let's keep talking. Thanks for listening to the Tide Generator podcast, produced by Avixa. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.